Okay, today I will talk about the minor tonality. Okay, and we are finished for now for this kind of harmonic concepts. And also today I will talk about the basic scales for improvising over bebop and jazz in general. Okay, so first let's go over the minor tonality. I think you know this, but I repeat this. So you remember last day we spoke about the secondary dominants, which are 5. You remember this? This is very important. When you improvise in any tune, any type of tune, you will find a lot of secondary dominants going in common. They all have one thing in common, well, 2 things. First, they all go to diatonic chords, which means the secondary dominants go into chords of the tonality, not outside chords. And another thing they have in common is like they are all based in the chord tones. They don't go off. Their bass is not outside the scale. So there are 5 secondary dominants. 1 in the second, like in C major, we have a secondary dominant in D, D7, very common. That maybe goes to G or not. Okay. Then we have another secondary dominant in E that maybe goes to A or not. Okay? Then we have the main dominant, the principal, which is G, that is not secondary. It's the only one that is not secondary. Then we have another one on A7 that maybe goes to D minor. And then we have another one on B, 7th degree, that maybe goes to E7. Very popular, this one also, because it's used to go to the relative minor. A lot of tunes use this. Okay? And finally we have a dominant in 1, very popular too, which makes the harmony goes to the 4th. No? So these are the 5 secondary dominants. There are no more dominants, secondary. Of course there are more. You can find dominants any degree of the scale, but they are not secondary. Okay? Any other dominant in any other position is not a secondary dominant, it's something else. They call them, there is one type very popular in jazz and American music, which is they call the extension dominants. Means they are the dominants of the secondary dominants. So they exist because the others exist. So an example of an extended dominant in the key of C could be F sharp 7th going to B7. That is called an extended dominant. And in jazz tunes, they are very popular. I can give you an example. For instance, the bridge of a rhythm changes. It's like there are 4 dominants. No? The last one is the 5th, is the principal dominant. Okay? Before that is a secondary dominant, which goes into the principal. And then the other 2 are extension dominants that go to each other till making the cycle of 5ths. Okay, so the other dominants you may find in any place in a tune are not secondary dominants, because secondary only 5 on the 1st degree, on the 2nd, on the 3rd, on the 6th, on the 7th, no more. Okay, so about the minor key. The minor key, as you know, comes from the major in the 6th degree. So, the minor key is based on this. But if you play this exactly like I'm writing here, you have a problem because this chord is still very strong. Is the dominant of C. So that chord will push the harmony into C major and not A minor. So what happened? Somebody long time ago, centuries ago, raised this note. Okay? Only raising this note, we have a dominant in the 5th of the minor scale. Okay? So this is a kind of artificial. This is not natural. Doesn't exist. So it was an artificial device to transform the minor scale into a tonality. Otherwise, it was a mode. Okay? What is a mode? A mode is a scale based. Yes, Aeolian. A mode is a scale based in a principal scale. Okay? A mode is one of the scales that you can run over a known scale. So to transform the Aeolian mode, which is the 6th, into a minor key, we have to raise the G in order to make a dominant in the 5th degree. So when we work and play and compose in minor, we have to pay attention to that. Okay? Or if you don't do that, we have another dominant in the 7th degree, which takes the harmony into C. Okay? So from this, thing means that theoretically all the chords that exist, the G note, all the chords change like this. This one has a G sharp. This one has a G sharp, this one of course, and this one. So there are new chords that come from the minor mode, right? Like for instance, this one. What's this? A minor with a sharp 7, right? Minor chord with a sharp 7. Okay? Here we have this, which is a major 7th chord with a sharp 5th. Something that doesn't exist in the major mode. Okay? Here we have a E7 that we know. Here is an F major, no problem, and here we have a new chord. Is G sharp diminished. So if you want to know where the diminished chords belong, the diminished chords belong to the 7th degree of a minor scale. Okay. Normally, and because the need for a dominant made the G raise off step, normally when we work on minor, reading or playing tunes or composing or improvising, normally we only use the G sharp over E7. The other chords, we don't use this. There is no need. We don't need to use this here. Because it puts the chord sounding very funny, and it's no need. We only need the G sharp here. Okay? Anyway, we can use those sounds, and they are. I'm going to give you a tune in a couple of days, which uses a lot of minor chords with sharp 7. They are kind of very dissonant, and because they are dissonant, the jazz musicians love them. Okay? So, but normally, if you play a song in minor, any song, popular song or whatever, you only hear the G sharp in the 5th degree. The rest, we use the natural mode. Okay? So, when we play a song or improvise over a song, a minor song, an easy minor song, we use the minor natural mode, and when we go to the dominant, we raise that note, which is the 7th of the scale. No? So, means that a typical melody.
OK， 如果你玩一首小調嘅歌，大部分時間咧嗰個當 A 小調咁話，個七音咧就唔升嘅，就玩翻一個自然小調嘅音階就得㗎啦。咁通常咧喺第5 chord 喺呢度即係 E7 嘅時候咧，我哋嗰個 G 咧就升翻佢。咁呢個就係最基本嘅聲音嚟嘅。但係好多爵士樂手咧，你睇到咧，如果我哋第一個 chord A minor 嘅時候咧，佢個 G 都升嘅話咧，我哋得出一個 A minor 7 sharp 嘅上面。minor major 7，所以就係一個好特殊嘅聲音。咁呢啲係下一步嘅事嚟嘅。我哋而家只針對5級做呢個升嘅音啊。Yes.
Okay, that's a melody in A minor. We don't use G sharp if we don't need. Here we don't need, so we don't use. But here we want to go to A, so we play 7. That's G sharp there. Okay.
所以 D minor 嘅時候有冇 G 呢個音啊？佢有經過音，但係佢冇需要升嘅。而家嚟講啦，因為佢只係4級啫嘛。咁但係 E7 係5級啦，喺呢個時候咧，我哋升疏嗰個音會去到啦，所以有呢個需要，我哋就升啦。
So, a good example to understand this, at least improvising, is playing autumn leaves, because autumn leaves, it's only a 2/5 into major and a 2/5 into the relative minor. Okay, so if we play autumn leaves, for instance, in C major, then the first 4 bars are D minor 7th, G7, C major. Okay, cool. We play the C major scale. Then the next 4 bars are B half diminished, which is the 2nd of the minor relative, and then E7 and A minor. So what should we do when we get into the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th bar? So when we get there, we just play the major scale with the G sharp. Okay? To push the harmony into A minor. Otherwise the harmony stays, the harmony goes to A minor, but your solo stays in C, which is, if you are clever and musical, maybe it's not a problem. Depends on the notes you choose to improvise. Okay? If you are not musical, then maybe it's a problem because you are playing over a major melody. Okay? So, autumn leaves is, if you are not aware of this, could be a difficult tune to improvise. Because if you get lost, you start to play the G sharp where it should not. Okay? So it's just, autumn leaves is like major, then minor, then major, then minor, then minor, minor, and finally, no, minor, major, it changes. No? So to play that tune, you just have to play the G sharp in the right place. Okay? It's not really an easy tune, but people normally use this tune to start, and it's not that easy. Okay? So, of course, everything we did on the major scale, I'm not repeating that. So, building the chords and then the tensions with the rules of the flat 9. You remember that if there is a flat 9 off, okay? So the same rules apply to this. So if you are really interested in checking out, just write down the notes and put the others on top, and you get exactly the same extensions as in the major mode. Okay? Remember that in the minor mode you only use the G in the 5th degree here, the G sharp. Okay, to transform this in a tonality. Otherwise, it's a mode. Okay? So, this applies to any song that we play in minor or goes to minor. This applies. Means if you play in a minor 2-5-1 or whatever minor, dominant going to minor, if you play the harmonic scale, which is this one, you are okay. You don't need to play anything more. So the harmonic scale is the result of this. No? Minor harmonic. You have heard about this for sure. This is the minor harmonic, or harmonic minor. So, the interesting thing about this scale is this interval, which is called an augmented second, because it looks like a second in the paper, but it sounds like a minor third. Okay? So that's this sound of a minor third in a scale in Western music is kind of strange, because in Western music all the scales are made of half steps and steps, not thirds, because in Western music third is for arpeggio, for a chord. So this scale looks in the paper, this looks as a second, but this is not a second in sound. This is bigger than a second. Okay?
So 和聲小調點解特別咧？就因為佢個6/7音呢個佢係一個爭議度嚟嘅。但係爭議度我哋名就叫爭議度，但係佢實際上係一個小三度聲音嚟㗎。咁本身咧大部分嘅音階都係二度為主嘅，全音同半音。咁突然有一個咁嘅小三度聲咧，所以令呢個音階咧個聲音變得好特別嘅。
Okay. So what happened with this sound? Can you play the scale, please? Okay, this sound. Yeah. This is kind of, for Western classical music, this is kind of strange. And this, at the time, this was not possible. So, how the musicians deal with this? For instance, Bach, a lot of times he used this interval, but he made reverse. You probably have heard this, the beginning of the invention number 2. I think it's like this. Like, I think it's something.
Yeah.
Like something like this. I can't remember. Okay, instead of writing, yeah, something like this. Okay. Okay, so the second invention of Bach starts like this. The guy, instead of writing, instead of going like da 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 dee, that was impossible for him to do this, because it was totally against the rules of the. Okay. Yeah. So he normally used this interval, of course, every time he was writing music in minor, but every time you get the interval, he made this kind of funny. Instead of going up in a augmented second, he goes down the inversion, and it makes a kind of diminished seventh, which sounds like a diminished seventh? Yeah, that's a diminished seventh. So it sounds like a minor seventh. No, a sixth, a major sixth. Okay. Okay. So this is possible for classical Western music. This going up like from B flat to C sharp? No. Okay? So in that time, in the time of Baroque music, what happened also to this scale? I don't know whom, but Bach, for instance, he uses it. Somebody start to use to repair this kind of strange interval. Some people start to use this F sharp here. So if you put an F sharp in the minor harmonic scale, you get another scale, of course, and then this augmented second interval is over. It doesn't exist anymore. This is called the melodic minor scale. Okay.
咁將個錄音升咗咧，就避咗頭先嗰個爭議論嘅問題啦。咁小六度變成大六度咧，就變成呢個旋律小調啦。
So you can see and hear in Bach music the melodic minor scale. Every time he goes up, he does that. What the first example? He goes up, but then he does this thing to avoid the major second interval. Or just if he wants really to go up, he puts the major sixth on the scale, and then he uses the melodic minor. Okay, what's happening to the melodic minor? Melodic minor is a very funny scale.
所以巴克個時代開始就咁，尤其是向上嘅時候，你睇到錄音都會升翻高嘅。所以點解叫旋律小調就係咁解啦？佢個旋律嘅走向都向上㗎嘛，咁就避咗嗰個爭議嗰個問題啦。咁如果佢一定要分和聲小調嗰個聲嘅時候咧，咁咧佢唔會一直向上嘅，佢會咁樣滑佢落翻嚟。
Okay, so melodic minor scale is an artificial scale, and it was invented to solve that problem there. So somebody raised the sixth, and the problem between the sixth and the seventh, the so-called major augmented second, that's over. The only problem about this scale is not a problem. It's a funny scale because it's artificial, and I'm saying the scale is funny. Why? Because from here to here, it sounds like a minor scale. From here to here, it sounds like a major scale. Okay? So the melodic minor is like da 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 da. Okay? And then ba da da da. It's minor and then major. So it's like the fusion of two worlds. Probably the guy that invented this F sharp never had never had the conscience that what he changed forever in the history of music. Because this scale is like the best of two worlds. Okay? And it's very strange. Okay? Why? Exactly because of this. Because of if you use this scale as an entity, getting the chords and everything from this scale, you get like a major sense and a minor sense together. Okay? So that's why this scale used very extensively in Baroque and also other styles, more modern, in classical music. Normally is used to provide melodies, okay, for writing melodies. But in modern more modern classical music, and of course in modern jazz, the scale is used to play and to provide chords, because this ambiguous sound of the major and minor, jazz musicians love this. So this scale is really, really used. I can show you a tune, maybe later, that we are going to play, a bebop tune, which uses this sound everywhere, like these chords based on the.
呢個觀念非常之重要。原本咧旋律小音階、旋律小調咧，係一個旋律走向就係解決嗰個6度同7度嗰樣嘢而存在嘅。一直古典音樂用咧都係咁樣去用嘅。但係到而家現代爵士咧，佢調翻轉，因為有咗呢個音階咧，佢就從呢個音階咧就堆疊起佢嘅呢一個音階所砌出嚟嘅曲，調翻轉嘅。所以現代爵士用非常之多嘅呢隻 scale 嘅。所以佢個存在係好特殊嘅呢隻音階嚇，用最多係呢隻嘅，用到呢類咁樣嘅嘢。Yes.
Okay, so this scale is very important to music in general, because as I said, it's like the best of two worlds together. So it's like a compromise between the minor and the major mode.
咁佢兩隻聲，你睇到喺前邊咧嗰段個聲咧就似小調，後嘅聲似大調，所以佢呢隻音階咧有兩種調性嘅特性喺度。
Of course, we will study more deeply during this workshop, but later on we'll study all the chords that we can build from this scale, because they are, and the modes, all the modes of this scale, because they are very, very used in modern jazz. So, but that we need a special class just to talk about this scale, you know, because there are at least 4 modes of this scale that are used extensively in modern jazz since the bebop. Okay? So, yeah.
Sorry， 從呢個小調，佢要可能要花1堂嘅時間專登再講呢個嘅，因為呢個咧係現代嘅爵士裏邊咧好常用，至少入邊有4個調式咧係而家好常用。
Okay, why this scale is so fascinating sound for the jazz musicians is exactly because what I said is like half minor, half major. It's like a totally ambiguous scale. And as you know, since the bebop, jazz is a mix of major with minor alterations, because when you play flat fifth, in major mod doesn't exist flats, you know. Major mod is all sharps, up. So when you use like in jazz, we are always using flat 9. A flat 9 is not from the major mode; it's from the minor. So jazz is all the time like a creative fight between the major and the minor keys. So when you play a jazz solo, unless you are playing a really traditional folk tune in major, okay, which is possible. Normally when you play a bebop jazz solo, you are playing a lot of notes from the minor. Like all the flat 9s, all the flat 13s, everything is borrowed from the minor key. Because in major, we don't have these sounds, okay? Major scale, if you do like the dominant, pa, 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 de, beep, it's a 9th. Natural 9. No, it's not ta 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 de. This is from minor. So the flat 9 is from minor. The flat 13, which is more up, is from the minor. No, and all these alterations, extensions of the chords, very in use in jazz. They come from minor. So when this scale started to be used, because the scale existed since the Baroque time, or before, I don't know. But in the Baroque time, the scale was used very extensively by Bach and all the people from that time. Okay? And then the scale remained and was used by the composers during centuries. And recently, when I say recently, I say like 100 and something years, the classical composers start to use this scale and other scales because they were tired of the major and minor. So they start to use these scales and strange scales to get new sounds, chords, especially chords. Okay. So when jazz music made the evolution since the beginning, since the New Orleans and swing, which was really simple harmony. After the bebop, jazz musicians naturally did the same as the classical composers. They went to this scale and said, let's check this out, okay? And they start to get all the sounds of this scale, which are not exactly tonal sounds. They are not, because they are mix of major and minor. So they are not clear sounds, okay? Don't write commercial music with this scale. It will be not commercial. People don't like this. The American film industry used this chord, the minor chord with the sharp seventh, extensively in the 50s and 60s. Every time they made music for a kind of a murder thriller film, you know, if you play C minor with or James Bond movies, play the chord.
呢個 minor major seven 就係50年代嗰陣時咧，啲荷里活戲啊，007嗰啲咪好多咧。
They used these old black and white Serie B movies from the American movies, from gangsters and police guys, and they always had this kind of yeah, but yeah, still today they use this sound.
007嗰啲最多㗎嘛。
Like James Bond, Goldfinger, this famous soundtrack. It's like all with these chords. Da da dee da da da. Spider-Man also. Yes. Every time there is a movie, American movie with one of these Captain America or these American heroes, probably there is a minor with a major 7 chords behind. Okay, so, but as you see, the sound is very dissonant because for our ears the scale has something wrong. Okay, it's the major 7 because our ears expect, because the chord is minor, we expect the minor 7 to become sweet and nice. Okay, if the major 7 is there, for us it's like major mixed with minor. It's not totally clear for our ears, okay? So that the sensation of dissonance, that all the chords from this scale, they present a sensation, a strange sensation of dissonance. Okay, so I hope you understood this. I may return to this later on. But today I also want to talk about the use of the scales in the improvisation. Of course, we were 1 week just trying to play chords and arpeggios, but improvisation, as you can hear even in the solos and the tunes we are listening, the bebop tunes, the players use arpeggios a lot, but also scales and modes, okay, to connect the notes. No, because in an arpeggio, in the middle there are space to put something more. If you have 4 notes, ta pa pa pi pa pa pa, and you put the notes that are missing, you have a scale. Okay, so the jazz musicians always used the major and the minor scales, of course. When I see the major and I say the major and minor, I'm talking about the major scale and the minor natural, which is the same, or the harmonic minor, as in classical music, no? But also they used other scales and modes. So, you know, from the major scale, if we start here, is the Ionian mode, which is the major scale itself. If we start here, is the Dorian. Okay, if we start here, the major scale is the Phrygian. Okay, if we start here, is the Lydian. Here is the Mixolydian. Here is the I think it's like that. With an R before it's like the buses. It's like the buses in Macau, the green buses.
So this is minor. There's always tragedies. Rio.
So I was telling them that we have this mode, which is used in the buses in Macau. And it's green. It's always green. Okay. And finally, the mode of the 7 is the Locrian. Okay. So, the important thing about this the important thing about this is that this is the Ionian. This is the Dorian. This is what you have to know. This is the Phrygian. You have to know this very quick in any key. Okay? You have to practice like any note on the saxophone or whatever instrument, any note, boom, and play the 7 modes. Okay? What?
And then fucked up.
Okay. Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian. You have to check the difference between them and see which modes are close to each other, because they are cousins. Some they just have one note difference. Okay. Then Mixolydian. So Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian. Now comes the Riolian. So it's like 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. Okay, and then finally Locrian. 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, flat 5, flat 6, flat 7. Okay? So to switch, when you practice, like to switch quickly from one mode to another, you have this table, and this is the original major scale, no, with the half steps here. So then you add or you subtract the flats and sharps, and you get all the other modes. But one important thing you must do is like check which modes are close, because they are very close to each other. Not in this order, but the minor modes, they have some other mode which is very close, only changes with one note, and you should know that very quickly. Like the three major are these.
第一、第四、第五本身都係大和。
There are three.
係啦，咁會近啲咯。
When I say major because they start with the major third, right? Only three. All the other modes have the flat third. So these three modes you can see they are very close. Like the okay.
所以記唔記得145都係大三和弦推出嚟㗎？所以佢個關係一定近啲㗎嘛。14都係 major seven 添，你睇下，咁爭個4音啫嘛，一個 sharp four 一個唔係 sharp four 啊嘛，1同5咧就爭個 flat 7啫嘛。你咁樣記唔記得啊
Okay. So myself, I know the modes because I memorized the modes like this. You know, I memorized like the Lydian is the major with the sharp fourth. Okay, I will never forget this. Okay, the Mixolydian is the major with the flat 7.
咁樣記下，大調 sharp four 大調 flat 7。
Okay, and then we have the three minor. These are the minor. I put like a cross minor. Well, the Locrian also is minor. 4.
咁7咧仲降個2，唯一有7咧降個2嘅啫。
They are minor because they have the flat third. Okay, so if you watch them closely, you can see that they are similar. Like the Dorian and the Aeolian are very similar. The only difference is this note.
2同6咧就爭個降6。
Dorian and Aeolian are cousins.
表兄弟啊。
Okay, and the Phrygian and the Locrian also cousins. The Locrian has just one more flat.
3同7都有降2㗎。
This is very important.
爭個降5啫，你咁樣記埋一 pair pair 咪易記咯。
Because to study this, because this is the interest of this is to play, you know, to know the change quickly. So the only interest for practical purposes, for studying, playing, is trying to switch from one mode to another with their similarities. Like play Phrygian and then Locrian, just one note flat, the 5th. Okay? Because the Phrygian and the Locrian, they sound quite the same, and you should be able to recognize the sound.
所以你練習嘅時候咧，揾2個近嘅模一齊嚟練。譬如你練第3隻同第7隻，爭個降5啫嘛，咁你就要個耳仔分辨到呢個聲。
So remember that this, what I'm telling you here, is for you to practice and get like a quick understanding how this works. So if you practice the modes like the 3 major and check which note changes, it's much more easy than have a big mess of modes, okay? At least on the beginning. So if you pick the 3 minor, the 4 minor modes, and if you group Dorian with Aeolian, they are very, very similar. Only one note changes. And if you pick Phrygian and Locrian, you can memorize like both modes have the flat 2. So they sound like ta-ra-rip, and then they are different. Okay? You understand? This is really, really important to practice. To understand the modes like this, in pairs.
1、4、5一組啦，2同6一組啦，3同7一組啦，咁知點解你對下啲音咪知咯？一組一組勁，跟住又練得㗎。
So, for what? All this for what? Very, very. Like if we are playing in C major, the C major scale, and the harmony goes to E minor, the C major scale with the first note on E is the Phrygian mode. Okay?
所以嗰個意義喺邊度啊？咁如果你今日彈 C 大調個 chord 嚟到 E 呢個 chord，你同樣 C 大調嘅音咧，對 E 嚟講咧，其實個排列就係 Phrygian 咁就好啦。明唔明？
Okay. The only way.
排列方式就叫 Phrygian。
The only way for the ones that are not familiar with this, the only way is hearing and trying to find out the differences. I'm going to play on the piano.
咁要耳仔聽嚟分辨嗰個音程啦。
So if I play the major scale like this, and I play the bass on C, this is major. everybody knows this is major. But if I play the bass on E, it's the same scale, but the bass is on E, so it's Phrygian. If I put the bass on A, and I play the C major, it sounds Aeolian. Okay, these are the famous modes. When you hear like, this is modal jazz or whatever, it means that modes are used. It's not major and minor as we know, like major scale or minor scale. No, when it's modal jazz, it's modes like Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, whatever mode. Okay, not tonal scales.
我哋講調式爵士就係講緊呢樣嘢，一個 cut 一個聲嚟㗎，同大小調冇關係，就純粹講呢一個調式上面嘅聲，明唔明啊？所以調式爵士嘅概念完全同調性、大小調係唔同嘅嘢。
Okay, so for instance, if you play guitar or bass, the fingerings for the 7 modes are exactly the same as the major scale. You know.
其實呢7個都係大嘅，係點樣加有彈啫嘛，照彈啫嘛，最緊要睇個 cut 停喺邊度。但係你理解個方式，你調咗就唔同啦。如果你從 E 開始數上去嘅話，嗰個關係就唔同啦嘛。但係仍然係先係點樣。
So if you know very well the major scales in all the instrument, all the range of the instrument, like a bass or a guitar, then you know the modes. You know how to finger the modes, and maybe your brain doesn't know what it is, but your fingers know. Okay, it's very important because if you come from conservatory or whatever, you know all your scales. Okay, well, then it's just a question for the brain, not for the fingers. Please tell them.
即係你手，如果我識玩 C 大調音階，就係你個低音停喺邊度啫嘛。其實叫你而家理解好辛苦嘅，但係你玩咪發嗦啊士哆來咪，你冇玩緊 fusion 啊。但係你唔會諗咁複雜噶嘛。呢個係個理論嚟嘅，推翻出嚟。但係的確你玩咪發嗦啊士哆來咪個聲就係 fusion 嘅聲嚟㗎嘛。明唔明嗰個意思啊？就而家解釋翻俾你聽，嗰個調式同調性係兩回事。
Okay, I put this a different way, and this is now is very important also. Like if I play in C, the 7 modes. First in C, I play Jonian, which is the major scale. No? Okay, now I play Dorian in C.
全部從 C 出發，聽唔聽到啊？所以而家唔同 key 嘅，其實玩緊即係。
You know what I'm doing? I'm playing B flat major scale.
係啦，其實佢彈緊降 B 大調嘅音。
Okay, so this is Dorian means that this Dorian is the second mode. So if the second mode is I'm playing Do, C. So this is the second mode of B flat. So I'm playing B flat major scale. So your fingers know if you play B flat major scale in the conservatory, your fingers know how to go. Okay. So if I go to Phrygian in C also, it sounds like this.
A flat.
So your fingers know this because they studied a flat major scale. Okay? Your fingers know this, and they know very well because you studied a flat major scale. So it's the only thing is a flat starting in C. Third. Okay, if I play Lydian, you also know, your fingers also know this. Your brain maybe not know. Because you studied the G major scale and Lydian is the fourth. So if I start G major in C, I have the Lydian mode. Okay. Next, if I play the Mixolydian in C, your fingers also know this. play the Aeolian, so this is the E flat major scale starting in C. So 3 flats. Okay, so if I start the Locrian mode in C, your fingers also know this. It's D flat major. The only difference is like I start in the 7th note. Okay, now to practice the ear, your ear. If you play the scales closely, like Ionian and Lydian, you can hear the difference. Like Ionian, Lydian, Ionian, Lydian. Ionian and Lydian, they have the perfect fifth. Ionian, Lydian. The rest is the same. So if you study like this, you very quickly you memorize this. Okay? So the minor, like Dorian and Aeolian, very, very easy. Dorian. Phrygian and Locrian, also very easy. Phrygian. Locrian. Quite the same, only changes the fifth. So it's like, Phrygian is like, Locrian. So, since the improvisers start to play jazz, like back in the New Orleans, Louis Armstrong and these guys, always they use the modes, even without knowing they were using the modes, because every time you use the major scale or the minor scale, natural minor, you are using the modes. Because the harmony changes and you still play the same scale, so it's one of the modes. So this is not nothing that some modern guy invented. Nothing. It's just as old as popular music itself. Okay. What happened really after the bebop revolution is some scales, some modes from this got much more popular than others. Okay? Okay. So, which modes got really, really popular? The modes needed to make the 2-5-1s in major and minor, okay? Only those. So, like Dorian, like 2, Dorian. 5, Mixolydian. 1, major. Major or Ionian. Okay? So, the Dorian mode is very popular, the Mixolydian mode is very popular, and the major mode is the most popular of them all. Okay? So, this is a 2-5-1 major. As you played all week before, all the bebop tunes, they are full of 2-5-1s major, and also minor. Okay? So, the Dorian mode is very popular because every time you have a minor 7 going to a dominant 7, you have the Dorian mode. You are in a major scale and you are playing starting on the 2nd degree, Dorian. Then goes to the 5th, Mixolydian. Goes to the 1, major. So very popular this. Next, the minor 2-5. Locrian, harmonic minor
小
here,
調嘅2即係大調嘅7啊。
Aeolian.
點解 harmonic minor 啊？咁嗰個叫咩？你睇翻頭先嗰個還原化聲桑嗰陣時候，所以咧小調嘅5咧，佢走嘅係 harmonic minor。
So why this minor 2-5-1 is like this? Locrian because the 2nd degree of the minor key is off diminished because the minor key is made on the 6th of the major tonality. So the 2nd degree of any minor 2-5-1 is off diminished. So it's the Locrian mode. Then the harmonic minor of this one why? Because of the beginning of this class, when I told in the minor scale, if you want to do the dominant in the 5th degree, you have to put a G sharp. Okay? So if you play the minor scale with the G sharp, you have the harmonic minor, as I told you. So every time you want to modulate into a minor key, you have to play the G sharp here. So you have the harmonic minor of this one. Okay? So these are the most popular scales in jazz and popular music. Dorian, Mixolydian, major, Locrian, harmonic minor, Aeolian. All the others, like Phrygians, Lydians, are kind of spicy scales, okay? Not really used in songs, okay? For use in songs, and when I say songs, I include the bebop tunes and the jazz tunes, is this. So if you master this in all the keys and you have nice phrases in all the keys, you can play jazz, no problem, okay? You don't need anything more, you just need this. Of course, jazz musicians with the passing of the years, they start to mix up in the major. They put the minor harmonic going to there, exactly as Bach also did. So a lot of times you see this, like Dorian, okay, this is very common. It's kind of a hybrid. In bebop, it's very common the Dorian 2-5-1, the major, with the dominant of the minor. Okay?
大小調撈埋一齊5級嘅時候咧，走佢嘅 harmonic minor， 1嘅 harmonic minor。
So, and this, when we come to scales, the scales, if you play this music like they did, based on the chords, then you start to understand why the harmonic minor here going to major, because they love to play the flat 9. So if you play the flat 9, you know, the flat 9 is here in the harmonic minor. So if you start to transcribe solos, you will find a lot of phrases over dominance with the harmonic minor, even if they go to major. Okay? Why? Just because exactly the love of the flat 9. If you use the flat 9 you are probably into the harmonic minor. Okay?
And flat 13 as well?
Yeah, because if I te ra ba do bo do bo do te ra da do do do, you play the minor scale harmonic going down, and then you go up the major like te ra ba do bo do de da 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 di.
所以就算大調2嘅時候咧，喺5上邊你聽到好多奇怪嘅音出嚟。點解會有降9音？點解會有降13音出嚟？就係喺嗰一刻，以 C 大調嚟講，喺5嘅 G7嘅時候，佢照套 C 和聲小調嘅音上去。咁會出現咩音啊？會降啦呢個音，就係 G 嘅降9音咯。降 E 呢個音就係 G 嘅降13音咯。所以嗰啲音係咁出嚟嘅。所以就算喺大調玩開大調，喺嗰一個剎那5嘅時候咧，佢照咁樣塞落去嘅。咁跟住翻到1嘅時候咧，照咁樣出嚟。咁你一執嗰個時候咧，就好多時都係咁出嚟嘅。所以個降13音同降9音係用得非常之多嘅。OK。
Okay, so this it's a clear ear, but then you have to practice this. This is I understood that. Okay, if you understand this, it doesn't mean that you play this. Okay, if you don't practice and if you don't really try to hear this in the records and try to transcribe, you will never play this. Okay, don't think that buying the book or writing all this in your scrapbook you will play this. You have to practice. Okay, so now just a few hints about these most common scales, and then we go into the use of chromatic tones. Why musicians use chromatic notes? First, if you play a scale without chromatic notes, it's kind of boring. Okay? Even the classical composers, they know that. If you play a scale with some interesting chromatic notes in between the notes, the scale gets more flavor, more interesting. No? Then, with the advance of jazz, the musicians, since the beginning, used chromatic notes. Like, for instance, they love, if they have a scale, like, imagine A minor, they love to do this. Why? Because it's, instead of playing ta-ra-ra-ra-dee, better play like ta-ra-ra-dee-da-ra. Okay? So, the chromatic approach to the one of the scale is very, very popular. The same as the chromatic approach to the one of an arpeggio is very, very popular. Okay? Not only in jazz, this is common in any type of music. So if you have ta-ra-ra-ra-dee, it's one thing. If you have like ta-ra-ra-ra-ra-ra, it's another thing. No. And the same as an arpeggio, like ta-da-da-dee. If you have like pa-da-da-da-dee, you have a valse. This ta-ra-ra-ra-dun, dun, ta-ra, ta-ra-ra-ra-dee. Okay? So, these guys, they knew this chromatic. So, it's not invented by the jazz musicians. So, the chromatic approach to the one of the scale and of the arpeggio. The chromatic approach to the third Very popular. What's the chromatic approach to the third? Is like sometimes in this case the chromatic note doesn't look chromatic, like the B going to C. But if it was A major, I had to put C natural going to C sharp. Okay? It's the same. Let's put A major here. So you have like it's like B sharp going to C sharp. A major. So this is a chromatic note approach a lot to the third. Here is the chromatic approach to the third. Okay, and so on, like the chromatic approach to the fifth. Remember that Charlie Parker phrase I told you? Po da da pa pi pa 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 po do bo po da pa pi pa da. This one po da pa pi pa da. This is like this. Fifth is F major here. Chromatic. B going to C. 5, 1, 3, 5, okay? Arpeggio. Chromatic. Do, da, pam, pam, pim. Po, pam, 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 pim. Chromatic to the fifth of a scale. Very popular. Okay, if you listen to the solos of these guys like Miles Davis and Charlie Parker and Sonny Rollins and so on, all the time they are playing these chromatics, all the time, okay? Sometimes they are not exactly like this, but they tend to be like this. So, there is one missing, which is the chromatic to the seventh, also very popular. So, what is the rule for the chromatics? More or less, they tend to connect, they tend to go into the chord tones. Why? Because you have to play and give importance to the chord tones. So when you use chromatics, they go into the chord tones, normally. What I call the chord tones are the notes that belong to the chord. 1, 3, 5, and for last, the 7th.
呢啲半音嘅音咧，都係為咗要結佢嗰個確定一三齊睇，咁你記住呢樣嘢啦。
You can do, of course, you can do chromatics to any note. even the ones that don't belong to the chord. But normally these guys, they do chromatics into the, they go to the chord tones, because the chord tones are the ones that sound really nice, because they belong to the chord. So, to make they sound even nicer and more important, they approach chromatically. Okay? So give more dramaticism to the note. Okay? Like the seventh. If you have like F7 or whatever, okay? Here is the chromatic. It doesn't look like a chromatic note, but it is. Okay? So it goes to the seventh, can go up. Up is very popular, this. Like this one. F7, the seventh is here, and this is the chromatic. Okay, so if you analyze a lot of solos, you will find not exactly this, but you will find something that you can relate to this. No? For instance, this one in a minor, if this is minor, this is extremely popular. This one. There are inclusively there are tunes. Coltrane has one, like what's it called? Take the no, it's not Coltrane. It's Duke Ellington. A tune he wrote for Coltrane to that record they made. I can't remember the name. It's like Train or something. It's like like it's that.
That's what I did for the summer tune in the intro.
Yes. Yeah, your tune. Yes, exactly. But in different keys now. It goes yeah.
Yeah, I stole it.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is very common, very popular. Nothing and the most important thing is like you understand how these work, and then start to identify these situations in the solos, okay? And if you like this guy makes this chromatic into that note, really nice. I copy. Just steal go to the solo and take the idea and make the idea yours. Okay? But the best thing is really identify this in the solos. Of course, situations are not exactly like this, but you may see that they always go into the chord tones with the chromatics. Then, to end this, as I told you before, in the 60s, with the advent of the jazz schools and jazz teaching, the teachers had to give names to all this, to teach and to evaluate the students. So, in the 60s, in the United States, some guys identified 3 scales with chromatic notes, passing notes, and they gave names to those scales. They call them the bebop scales. Why? Because analyzing a lot of solos, they realized that most of the bebop players played the chromatic notes in the same place. So, and then some guys, I think was Jerry Cocker and his friends, they called the bebop scales, which are exactly the modes with chromatic notes. So there are three. The Dorian, it's exactly for the 251. The Dorian, bebop, the Mixolydian, and the Ionian. What's the Dorian bebop scale? Is a Dorian scale with a chromatic tone. Between the fourth and the third of the scale, there is a chromatic note. Why in this position? Because, as they say, in the solos they analyzed, most of the guys play the chromatic notes here. Yeah. Okay, like ti ta ra pa 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 pa. Okay. So this is one famous, the Dorian bebop. What the Mixolydian bebop? So this is the fourth, third, and the chromatic note here. The Mixolydian bebop is in a different position. Okay. No. I was okay. Okay. Mixolydian bebop. Di da 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 da. Okay. And finally, the Ionian bebop or major bebop scale. Between the 6th and the 5th. So, as you can see, always, even in these scales, the chromatic note goes into a chord tone. No? Maybe it starts in a scale tone, but the ending note, which means the important note, is a chord tone. Here is the third of this chord. Here is the seventh of this. Here is the fifth. So it goes into the important note of the chord. Like in the minor goes into the minor third. Okay, important. In the seventh goes into the seventh. Important. And in the major goes into the fifth as an important note. Okay? So another thing in common in these bebop scales. Always the chromaticism is between two scale tones, so it's like a whole step divided in 12 steps. Okay? So don't try to play chromatics in other places in these scales, because here is where they sound good. You may try other things, but this is where everybody played the chromatics. Played and played. So I suggest, when you practice, first get into the Dorian mode, and you can play the Dorian mode in all keys. Start immediately to play the chromatic Dorian mode. So you get used to the Dorian mode already with the chromatic notes. Which means that every time you play the Dorian mode, you play like this. Okay? The same for the other scales, for the mixolydian, and for the major, maybe is the less important because it doesn't go to the really an important note. The fifth is kind of a dual tone, but the third in the minor chord and the seventh in the dominant, come on, are very important. So that's the reason always musicians approach the third from the fourth. I mean playing a scale, because before I told you there is a way to approach chromatically the third, but going straight into the arpeggio, right? Here are scales, so you are playing a scale and then you go chromatically into the third in a minor seventh chord. In the dominant, you are playing the scale, you go chromatic since the 1 to the flat 7. Okay? Why? Tradition. Everybody does that. It's the language of jazz. So what these guys did was really transcribing what everybody played and give name to this. It's exactly what they did. To teach with a name is more easy to teach. So do you know the bebop scale? Ah, no, where? Ah, I have to study the bebop scale, okay? The names is exactly for this. Because when there were no schools, the players learned to play this, hearing the other ones. And they knew, this guy plays this scale like this, I want to play like him, so I played. But they didn't know exactly why. It was like, never forget, jazz is our oral tradition. Everything is learned by ear, okay? And nowadays we have all the books and all the names and everything, but to really play this music you have to, of course you will learn by the books and by this, the theory, but then to play you have to learn by ear. Otherwise you are unable to play. Really interesting, because your ears are not working 100%. So, did you understand this? Now we are able, of course we will talk more about this when we start to analyze more tunes and solos, but this gives you the tools to start to work on solos and understand what they are doing. So, when they are not playing the arpeggios or the scales, they are playing chromatic notes over the arpeggios and the scales. Okay? So, let's play. We do a break. I don't know what time is it.